Hi everyone, Benedict.
Dominus.
Welcome back to our school's podcast channel. My name is Balázs Pozsgay, and we have Father John, our spiritual leader, and Marcell Vasi from the 12th grade. And today we're diving into a topic that's all about discipline, self-reflection, and hitting the reset button. And we will be talking about Lent and the challenge called Exodus that many enthusiastic boys do in the school. And Father John, as a Cistercian monk, you have more knowledge and experience in this topic. And could you share with us the connection of Lent to the monastic tradition and its history and spirituality?
Yeah, sure. Well, we could probably begin maybe with how old we think Lent is. And so far as we can tell, it's very, very old. We have some texts from the 2nd century that reflect a practice even older than the 2nd century. So St. Irenaeus talks about a period of fasting for as many as 40 days. And St. Irenaeus dies in 202. And he refers to the practice as something our forefathers did. And so for St. Irenaeus, who is living in the 2nd century, to refer to a custom that his forefathers did, that's kind of code language for the apostolic tradition. So it's a very, very old tradition to fast before Easter. And Irenaeus, I believe in these letters, was talking to the Pope about, the dates of Easter and how long the fast should be and these sorts of things. So they're already trying to discuss details of the experience, and thus they're taking for granted that this experience exists. So it's very, very old, and I think it is a beautiful tradition that we as a community do something spiritual together. Everyone can have his own individual program, and that's very important because we all have a personal relationship with God. But it's also very beautiful precisely because we're Christian and how we understand the nature of salvation, that we go into a spiritual exercise together. And I think it's important that we see that this together is not just all of us here living today, but a together that goes all the way back through history, as far back as we can tell, maybe even to the apostles. So maybe that's the first thing I say, is that we do this together. And I think sometimes people can have a hard time. They think like, oh, the rules, the church says I can't eat meat on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday, and I want to eat meat, and why these rules? And if you think about it as rules, it could be a very unhelpful mindset. I like to think of it as like family. Like families too have rules where you all do certain things together. And it's not about the rule, it's about the shared life. It's about the family. And we as Catholics, we think of it like that, the spiritual life. Of course, you have your own personal disciplines as well, but we also do things together. And I think it's a beautiful thing.
It is truly.
Yeah. And then I think that, in history, you have councils and bishops and popes and saints all talking about the tradition. You asked also about the monastic element. And perhaps it could be fun to read the chapter from the Rule of St. Benedict. Because St. Benedict, the father of Western monks, as we say, he was someone who wrote the rule that has given so much light and inspiration to the Cistercian tradition, and before him also to all Benedictine monasteries. And so our experience of Lent is very much shaped by St. Benedict. And it could be helpful to read that. So I brought with me 2 copies, one an English copy and one a Hungarian copy. And we could read both of them. And maybe I'll start with the English, and then Balázs, you can read the Hungarian. So it's a beautiful chapter. We'll both read it, and then maybe we'll comment on it. So it's chapter 49 in the Rule of St. Benedict. And it says, "The observance of Lent. The life of a monk ought to be a continuous Lent. Since few, however, have the strength for this, we urge the entire community during these days of Lent to keep its manner of life most pure, and to wash away in this holy season the negligences of other times. This we can do in a fitting manner by refusing to indulge evil habits, and by devoting ourselves to prayer with tears, to reading, to compunction of heart and self-denial. During these days, therefore, we will add to the usual measure of our service something by way of private prayer and abstinence from food or drink, so that each of us will have something above the assigned measure to offer God of his own will with the joy of the Holy Spirit. In other words, let each one deny himself some food, drink, sleep, needless talking, and idle jesting, and look forward to Holy Easter with joy and spiritual longing. Everyone should, however, make known to the abbot what he intends to do, since it ought to be done with his prayer and approval. Whatever is undertaken without the permission of the spiritual father will be reckoned as presumption and vainglory, not deserving a reward. Therefore, everything must be done with the abbot's approval.
Is it this chapter? Or?
It is chapter 49. That's fun. The bookmark was in that chapter because this is the rule, the copy of the rule that we read at Hymfi. So I stole it from the chapel
Okay.
at many monasteries and also here at Hymfi. Father Ursh, Father Daniel, Nivar Teshver, and I, after midday prayer, we always read a chapter from the rule or a little brief section. And so I hope I don't get in trouble. I have to figure out where that came from. But anyway, here's chapter 49.
A 40 napi böjt megtartása. A szerzetes életének olyannak kell lennie, mintha állandóan 40 napi böjti fegyelem alatt élne. Mégis mivel kevesekben van meg ehhez az erő, ezért azt tanácsoljuk, hogy a 40 napnak ebben az idejében teljes tisztasággal élje életét. Ugyanakkor a más időkben elkövetett hanyagságait ezekben a szent napokban tegye jóvá. Ez akkor történik megfelelő módon, ha minden bűntől tartózkodunk, könnyek közt imádkozunk, szent olvasmányokat olvasunk, a szív töredelmére és az önmegtagadás cselekedeteire törekedünk. Ezekben a napokban tehát szolgálatunk szokott mértékéhez adjunk hozzá valamit, külön imádságokat, ételben és italban való önmegtagadást. A kiszabott mértéken felül mindenki ajánljon föl valamit Isten akaratából, a Szentlélek örömében Istennek. Azaz vonjon meg valamit testétől az ételben, italban, alvásban, beszédben és tréfálkozásban, és így a lelki vágyódás örömével várja a szent húsvétot. Azt azonban, amit kiki felajánl, terjessze apátja elé, és az ő imádságával és beleegyezésével tegye, mert ami a lelki atya jóváhagyása nélkül történik, elbizakodottságnak és hiú dicsőségvágynak számít, nem érdemnek. Tehát mindent az apát beleegyezésével tegyenek.
There are a lot of things that I'd like to point out in that passage. One is, I love the way he begins. He says, the life of a monk should be a continuous Lent. But since few monks have the strength for that, like we have this period of time, you see in monastic literature always these self-critical comments. Like monks are in a good sense, always dissatisfied with themselves. They always want to grow. And they're always measuring themselves by a very high ideal. And, today we can think, gosh, I wish we were as good as the monks in the time of St. Benedict. But then you read the monks in the time of St. Benedict, and they wish they were as good as the monks before. And you see that throughout monastic literature. And I think that's important because it shows that we're not satisfied. We don't feel like we've arrived. Like St. Paul, forgetting what lies behind and striving to what lies before. And ahead of us in our upward calling in Christ Jesus. So it's not a mean-spirited, like always critical in a negative sense. It's you believe that you're capable of a very high ideal, and so you're always striving to grow. So that's the first thing that I want to point out about that. Another is that Saint Benedict wants the monks to choose something freely. So we have, like I mentioned before, like these things that the church asks us all to do. And today those are very simple. So abstinence from meat on Good Friday and on Ash Wednesday, and also from Fridays during Lent, all other Fridays, and then fasting. So eating less on Ash Wednesday and Friday, and Good Friday. I think I got that right. Anyway, both a combination of abstinence, where you're eating no meat, you're not doing any of the kind, and then fasting, where you're just doing less. And the fasting on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday, we usually explain as only one full meal, and then you can have 2 snacks that, when combined together, wouldn't equal a whole second meal. So we do all those things together, but St. Benedict is focused also on what each of us does freely, to offer something up. And that idea of freedom, I think, is super important for St. Benedict, because the point is to increase our longing, our joy, our anticipation of Easter. He uses those words of longing and joy, looking forward to Easter. And if you think about an athlete, when an athlete makes a sacrifice, athletes do that freely, right? The athlete eats healthy foods and doesn't eat sugary foods because the athlete wants something. The athlete wants to be able to perform better. The athlete wakes up really early to go to practice because the athlete wants to get better and enjoy the excellence of great performance. It's in that kind of spirit that St. Benedict wants us to give something up freely in Lent, because we desire something. We love the good that's held out to us in front, such that we're ready to sacrifice the things necessary to make us stronger and more able to enjoy the good.
So give up something for the better and higher goal.
Yeah. It's not simply like, oh, I'm such a bad guy, so I should punish myself. Like, there is a spirit of penance within what we give up as well. But it's ultimately like you do penance because you want to grow in love. It's ultimately an extremely positive goal. And I think it's important to understand it that way, because that makes sense of the freedom within it. You really want to find something that is personal and is free to give up. That helps you exercise your true desire for God and for the excellence of living in union with Him. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, but at the very end of the passage, there is a sentence that you have to do everything that the abbot says.
Yeah.
For you, there is the abbot. For the athlete, there is the coach.
Yeah.
Who can be like a normal or ordinary people's coach or guide?
Yeah. That's excellent question. Maybe before I answer it, let's think about why it's important to have someone like that. So in the monastery, at least, you can sometimes have very zealous people, right? And they could be motivated sometimes by pure motives and sometimes by vain motives. Like sometimes I could say, oh, I want to fast a lot because then my cheeks look real thin and I seem like a very holy monk, right?
Is it a thing in the monastery that you are caring about how you look?
Unfortunately, we're all subject. We can all be tempted like that.
Wow.
Like I could want to fast or want to penance in order to be seen by others and to appear holier than I am.
Okay.
That's a possibility, and sometimes that temptation can lead you to unhealthy things. You could give up things that you probably shouldn't give up, or like, for example, I could want to be so holy and so ascetical that I could say I eat nothing, every day, and then I show up for the Mass Tuesday, Thursday mornings, and I'm so tired and I'm not able to like serve well, right? So you could certainly fast in ways that are imprudent and that just serve your vanity. So St. Benedict knows this, and he wants the monk, therefore, to check with his abbot to make sure that he's doing something that's healthy. And like you're saying, the coach also. You could have an athlete who wants to get really good at the sport. So he goes to the gym every day, he lifts weights, and he doesn't know exactly how the human body grows, that periods of rest are very important for muscle development. And so he could just like burn out his muscles and then get an injury because of his zeal that was not prudent. So it's important to have someone to help you think things through and give the wisdom of experience. And I think that in the life of people who don't have an abbot or who don't have, a coach, so to speak, who's in that role, you need good friends, you need parents, you need mentors in the faith. So hopefully we all are able to rely on our relationships for that kind of depth. And that's maybe a gift of a place like St. Imre, is that you can, because it's a Catholic school, because we're doing a podcast like this, you can go to your friends and say, okay, it's Lent, guys, what are we doing? And here's what I'm doing. What do you think about this? Good idea, bad idea? Is this challenging enough? Or is this, too challenging or challenging in a way that's inappropriate? And you mentioned Exodus 90 earlier. Exodus 90 has that component where you meet with your bros, your group of fraternity, and share how Lent is going. I think one purpose of that kind of group is this. So you do wisely what you do.
Yeah, we're doing the three Exodus or Tir Exodus. That's only 40 days, so it's only in the Lent period, and it's like Exodus, the 90-day challenge, but it's for shorter version for the little boys or for us. So it's not very harsh like the Exodus, and it's about having a connection with your anchor partner.
Exactly,
and talking with him or her every day and sharing your thoughts, your experiences about this challenge. And let me say a little bit about this challenge. So you should sleep enough, 7.5 hours, 20 minutes self-reflection every day, to meditate. And I don't know. So talk about your day. No snacking, no sodas, no desserts throughout the day. Of course, no alcohol, no smoking. That's obvious. And every Wednesday or Monday, what's better for you? There is a recession in the chapel at 7:15 in the group amongst peers, and we share thoughts, we share experiences with our leaders. So it's Zoltán Vastanáró.
Nice.
Yeah, and we talk about this experience. So how can we feel it? How can we live with this challenge throughout the 40-day fasting?
That's awesome, Balázs. That's fantastic. I'm very proud to be here when you guys are doing that. I mean, that's beautiful. And there's 90-day fast. Exodus 90 does it because I think there's a tradition of a longer 90-day fast. But I think the more universal tradition was 40 days, because that's the biblical number. And so there's no shame in only doing 40 days, And it sounds like this program is wise in so far as it's aware that, you led with you have to sleep 7.5 hours a day. And that suggests a very wise person who created that, I think, because either you have someone who says, I'm going to be so tough and I'm going to wake up at 4 a.m. and then fall asleep in math class. That doesn't help, right? So you need to realize that you have to choose a sacrifice that leads to genuine health. Moreover, I think a lot of times teenagers these days, they get less than 7.5 hours, and it's actually a very ascetical choice for them to say, I'm going to bed at 10 o'clock. Like your real fasting for some kids is going to be, I'm going to bed at 10. I've got a game I could play, people I could talk to, but I'm going to bed at 10 because of the discipline.
Give up those.
Yeah, exactly.
What is your favorite form of fasting, if you can share it?
I think right now, so there are two things that I really enjoy, because both of them they still pull on me. One of them is to diminish or eliminate the time I spend checking the news on the internet. So I'll have many days in Lent, and then I'll do other days during the year where I just do not look at news, because I've noticed that if I am not deliberate about that, I could either spend a lot of time on news, which for me is something like 45 minutes to an hour. If I spend 45 minutes to an hour on news, I think that's too much. It is, for my vocation, it is not necessary. I should be informed. I should know what's going on, but every day, 45 minutes to 60 minutes, I've got Bible to read, lessons to prepare, homilies to prepare. That's a whole hour in a day, so a lot less. But I've also noticed that for me, the worst temptation, or the one that I'm more vulnerable to, is the frequency of checking the internet. So if I finish a task, an email, or I have 10 minutes before the next thing, this urge comes, oh, let me check the internet, let me check the website. And I find that the more I give into that, the worse, because I'm just living through the urge of the moment. Instead of saying, oh, I've got 5 minutes free. What if I just prayed? Imagine that, right? So I find that in Lent, a very good form of asceticism for me is to diminish the amount of time I spend, or just say once a day, and that's it. Another thing that I've come to really like doing is cold showers. So it's a great moment of first thing in the morning, you're in the shower and it's okay, some things in life are hard, some things are difficult, and you just sort of go into the day with this attitude that it's all good. It's okay.
You survived.
You survived. You survived. And it can even be refreshing. Initially, I won't lie, it's a little hard, but then you push through and you find comfort in the discomfort. So I think those two are probably some of my favorites today. Yeah. Do you guys have any you really like, or any that are popular at St. Imre?
I've tried using the internet less. Unfortunately, I failed many times in this Lent as well. So I'm really working on it. And since I'm a senior, I have to study a lot.
Yeah.
So sometimes I should focus more on studies than checking YouTube. For me, the biggest temptation is YouTube.
Yeah.
Because I always find something to just watch, and it's always easier and it's more entertaining as well.
Yeah, I hear you. It's a good thing that you sense that it's not just about taking away things. It could be about adding things, like add more time to study. You know, if I say my Lenten discipline is to every day an hour and a half, I'm going to be at that kitchen table, you know, no matter what I have for Házi feladat or not. I have found with YouTube, I can also easily struggle with YouTube because, you know, there are so many videos pop up and they're designed, right?
They have a great algorithm as well.
But I found a way to turn that off. So what you can turn off your watch history. I don't know what that is. In one of the settings, I don't know how I did it at some point, but at some point I did it. Where now when I go to YouTube on my computer, it just shows the search bar.
Okay.
And so I could go there to find only what I'm looking for. And as soon as I open up YouTube, I don't see all this. Like I've had that moment where in the past, I'll go to YouTube and I'll forget why I went there. Because you just go and you see all these other possibilities. So I was really glad when I found that. Of course, you still have the bar on the side once you look for a video. But I try to, you know. Anyway, yeah. What about you, Balázs? You got any good ones?
It could be the same for me. Yeah. So cutting down on phone usage and and access to screen time. And most I failed is snacking desserts, because we have a lot of snacks at home, and I just go into the kitchen and a little bit of chocolate, a little sweets, and I know I shouldn't because it's about Exodus, but it's just once. I tell myself. And cold showers, I enjoy those because I know it's good for my body, and I don't know, it can be good in some way. Yeah, it's quite a survival to start and to push through it, but at the end, it's refreshing. I would say. Yeah. The most is screen time.
The bit about snacking is a good one too. This may sound silly, but in the past, I have found it helpful to first you have a moment where you're not so desirous of the snack right now. Like you choose, even when you're not like really feeling an urge for it, you say, okay, I'm going to have a really cool practice right now. I'm going to go down to the kitchen. I'm going to get the snack out. I'm going to put it on a plate. I'm going to look at it. And then I'm going to put it back. You know, because if you kind of go into it really deliberately and you say, I know how I'm going to feel when I get down there. I'm going to put that on the plate. I'm going to have all the strong desire to eat it. I'm going to feel that. It's okay. I'm going to let that feeling come. And then I'm going to put that cookie back. There's a really good practice there.
Okay,
but if you
try
it. Do it before you get the urge. Like, because that way you could be very intentional.
But when I get the urge, I also get the idea at the same time. So,
well, you could say, I don't know. You could say, okay, 3:00, no matter what's going on, I'm going to go to the kitchen and I'm going to look at that cookie, and I'm gonna say, Our Father, mi atyánk. I'm gonna look at that cookie, then I'm gonna go back to my room.
Give us until you.
The idea is, I think, you know, at least psychologically, the idea is to learn to be okay with the experience of the urge. You know, to realize, I feel a desire for something. It's okay. I'm not going to give in to this desire, but I accept that I have it, and now I go back. When you become aware of it, really intentional about it, it can lose its force.
Yeah, it's tricky because the urge is not what you really want. You just have 1 hour or half-hour session that you have to go through.
Yes.
You have to survive that. And after you feel the same.
Yes.
Yeah, in my experience.
Yes, mine too. And the more aware you are that this is an urge, the more you can distinguish between yourself and your urge, the more powerful you'll be in resisting temptation. I think a problem comes is when we just identify the two, where I'm nothing but my urge, right? So in being really intentional can help you make that distinction.
I've learned a great word and expression from one of your students that I hosted last year, from George Saliga, a word called temperance.
Yeah.
And I love that word. So it's important.
George is a very temperate man. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. Cool. Maybe another fun thought is to connect the experience to the scriptural, scriptural experiences, particularly with 40. So the church went with the number 40 because there are so many moments in the Bible where people have a spiritual experience of 40 days. You know, there's Israel that's wandering through the wilderness for 40 days. There's Moses who's on Mount Sinai waiting for the commandments for 40 days. There's Elijah who walks 40 days to go to Mount Horeb or Mount Sinai where he experiences God. There's Jesus who's in the desert for 40 days experiencing temptation. And so this is something of a very strong biblical number. And I think from all of those experiences, you know, Israel in the wilderness, Moses on Mount Sinai, Elijah, Jesus, you can find deep meanings for this period of Lent. You know, if you think about Israel in the wilderness, you realize that Israel is waiting for the promised land. You know, when we're in Lent and we are experiencing this longing, this desire, where we're unsettled, we have an urge that we can't satisfy, we should feel very at home with the people of Israel wandering through the desert, waiting for the promised land, you know? And you realize that that experience of longing, of desire is very fitting for this life. You know, we want to think that we can get everything we want, but it's not true. Lent is a very honest time where we all come very deeply to recall the fact that we're still waiting, we're still wanting. The promised land is in the future. So that's powerful. I think also with Moses and Elijah going to Mount Sinai and Mount Horeb and having a period of waiting before they experience God, that's also the experience of Lent, where you're waiting for God, you're longing for Him to come to you. And when you are fasting and abstinence, you are recalling your identity as a creature. Like you're recognizing your dependence upon God, that how much we need Him to be happy, and how much we must defer to Him, how much He rules our lives in His benevolent goodness and has told us so much of His wisdom to guide our lives. And when you're doing that during Lent, you're very much like Moses and Elijah, waiting to receive the law, waiting to experience the friendship of the Creator. And then finally with Jesus, that's maybe the most consoling, because Jesus goes into the desert for 40 years and He experiences temptation. Like he doesn't experience the kind of temptation that belongs to sin. It's not like, you know, there is a kind of temptation where, you know, like, ooh, I have a divided heart. Like there's a part of me that really wants the evil thing because sadly I have a vicious habit. But then there's also the experience of temptation where it's like, that's a good thing. And I recognize that that's good and I'm attracted to it. But I also see that right now is not the time. And so I won't go to it. Jesus didn't have that first kind because His heart wasn't divided. He loved the Father completely. But He, like any human being, could get hungry. He could get thirsty. He could want things that in that moment weren't fitting. And so He would have to wait like anyone else.
Satan attacked the human side of Jesus.
Yeah. He was vulnerable in his human nature to temptation, exactly. Because that's where we experience need. Yeah. And so you can know that in your experience of Lent, in your longing, your desire for the snack, that Jesus is right there. You know, if you're in the desert with Him, in some sense, that's maybe what it's all about, right? That through all of our spiritual exercises, our ultimate goal is to deepen our friendship with Jesus, like to realize how close we are to Him in all of these encounters.
And sometimes we have a bigger, greater urge that we want to meet Him at the end of our path.
Amen.
So,
Amen. Amen.
It's a great way to think that,
that's what it's all about, getting to Him.
Promised land.
Amen. Yeah. Getting to Him. And experiences of celebration and experiences of penance, thanks be to God, we can meet Him in both. Because our life involves both. Yeah. Maybe, I don't know if this interests you guys, but it sure interests me that we've been talking now very spiritually, and I think that's the right frame for Lent. But there's a big part of the world that is rediscovering fasting for non-spiritual motives. And like, have you heard of, I don't know what it is in Hungarian, intermittent fasting? Like where you fast for periods of time. We could Google it or something. Okay. Yeah. I should have looked up the phrase, but at least in America, it's becoming very popular to fast because there's a lot of science which suggests that our bodies actually need periods of deprivation, periods where they're not satiated with food, 14, 16 hours at least, in order to shift our bodies over into some new kind of stage in metabolism. And it's actually unhealthy if we are always filled with food, if our blood sugar is always high or something. And there are cognitive benefits to fasting. There are physical benefits where your body can purify itself of certain things. I think that there's even evidence which suggests that rates of cancer can go down with fasting. So people are discovering that there's actually a lot of physical good things about fasting. And so I know people who, even outside of Lent, will skip breakfast and they will not eat for a period of like 16, 17 hours in order to condense all of their eating in the day to a smaller window of time, such that their body at other times can have the experience of fasting.
So they are doing this just for their health
Yeah.
and their body, not to meet Jesus and to experience the Holy Week.
Right.
Yeah, okay,
Right.
okay.
It's out there as a new trend in health to do some fasting, and I've experienced some truth in that. I've tried it different times in my life, and I have found that there's a sweet spot where, like, sometimes if I don't eat enough, I just get tired and silly, But sometimes if I deprive myself a little bit, I find that I can be sharper in my brain.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And I don't understand all the scientific reasons why. You could read the literature there. But to me, it seems true that in a good proportion, good moderation. And then there are, of course, other people who, for psychological benefits, also fast. So maybe you've heard there's a very famous, again, at least in America, there was a study at Stanford done sometime in the 60s and 70s that I think is called the Marshmallow study, where if you heard, it's super famous,
It's
right?
done among kids.
Yes, exactly. Where you have a kid and you sit him in the room and he's got a marshmallow in front of him. And you say, if you don't eat that marshmallow...
You get a whole plate of marshmallows.
Exactly. When I come back, I'll give you at least two. And the study marked which kids said, forget it, I want the marshmallow now, and which kids could delay gratification, who could postpone that into the future. And they found over longitudinal studies that those children that were able to delay gratification tended to do much better in life.
They were more successful, happier life,
Yeah. And so people, in some sense, this was, a discovery of what we kind of should have always known and what we always did know in the spiritual tradition, that self-control is a good thing, the ability to think into the future and make decisions now based on that future is a good thing. So in some sense, it's kind of the obvious, but even science now says it, so we can all agree, And in any case, people, I think, whether they're religious or not, trust wisdom like that, and they are willing to say, yeah, it's better for me if I can control myself and delay gratification.
And you get a whole plate of marshmallows.
And get a whole plate of marshmallows. And that's fine. And this is maybe where the spiritual side needs to come in and help the world, because if you delay gratification just to indulge later and still get sick because you eat a whole plate of marshmallows, we've missed something, right? The person who's just living for marshmallows hasn't quite understood the real good that we sacrifice for. And I think what we were saying earlier about friendship with Jesus is that's the real goal. That's what brings happiness. And maybe to say it in more psychological language so that people out there can, more broadly appreciate it, is that, when you are able to control yourself, you are more free, right? If you're not always giving into your urges, you're more free. You do what you want when you want, and you don't just follow your impulses of your biology. And when you are more free, you can give yourself away in love. It's not love if I just follow my urges. Even if it looks like in romance, if I just, if I love a woman just because of biological urge, that may not be love. Certainly it isn't if it's only biological urge. Animals do the same thing. But if I control myself in all my urges, whether sexual or any other, I can give myself when, where, and how I know is right. And then I can pursue the true good of someone and truly, therefore, love. And so all of this self-control that we try to build in Lent ultimately should be aimed, I think the Christian would certainly say this, and hopefully the rest of the world could agree, at least in this much, at the kind of control that allows you to do the true good, to really love yourself and other people, to make yourself a gift for other people. That's, I think, hopefully everyone could agree on that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the one who's most worthy of our love, the most deserving of all our self-control and self-gift is our Creator, who's made himself known to us and put himself in our lives so that we can have friendship with him in Christ.
So Lent shouldn't be just a 4-day challenge. It should be the way how we live our life.
Yes.
Yeah.
What was the first sentence? The life of
Yeah.
a monk should be a continuous Lent.
Not just monks, every people
Everybody
in their
yes.
way. How can
yes.
this? Yeah.
Absolutely. Because and the monastic life is really just an effort to live that Christian life with everything structured to make it possible and as easy as possible. But you're absolutely right. Every Christian, the life of every Christian in that sense should be a continuous Lent. We could try a little in Hungarian if you want, just for fun, so that people can be encouraged. So, szép volt a beszélgetés, ugye?
Szép volt.
Most talán tudunk egy kicsit játszani magyarul, mert tanultam sokat, és szeretnék kipróbálni talán már egy kicsit magyarul beszélni.
Szuper. Igen.
Van valami kérdésetek nagy bőjtről, vagy valamiről más?
Tapasztalataid alapján mi a különbség az itteni ciszterci rend és a kinti, a dallaszi ciszterci rendnek a böjtölési hagyományai, mint közösségben hagyományai terén?
Oké. Ha értettem a kérdésedet, mi a különbség Nagybőjt Dallasban és itt Magyarországon?
Igen.
Jó kérdés. De nem tudom sokat arról. Tudom mondani, hogy Dallasban mindenki próbál valamit feladni egyedül, és különösen a fiatal szerzetes mond az apátnak, vagy a időszerzetesnek mit szeretne feladni, as he says, right? És nincs sok sütemény a monastorban, és van néhány szerzetes, aki Stations of the Cross. How do you do stations? What's Stations of the Cross?
Keresztút,
igen. Igen. És igen, szóval nincs sütemény. Pénteken biztos nincs hús a monastorban.
Hús.
Oh yeah, hús. Ezért van egy kicsit szabály közös az egész közösségre, de van, as he says, how do you say that? Úgymond,
ahogy mondja,
ahogy mond Benedict szerint, egy döntés, amit minden szerzetes kell csinálni.
Mindenkinek kell csinálni.
Igen. Érhető volt?
Igen.
Persze.
Örülök.
Neked van valami kérdésed felénk, vagy?
Igen. Nekem van kérdés.
Igen, neked van-e?
Igen. Szeretnék tudni többet. Szent Imrében hány diák tud T-rex csinálni, és ha van valaki diák az interneten, aki szeretne csinálni azt, kinek kell menni?
Tehát a suliban a 10-től 12-esek, tehát a felső 3 évfolyam tudja ezt csinálni. Nekünk van meghirdetve, és hát aki akar ebbe belépni ebben az évfolyam, tehát ebben a 3 évfolyamból fiúk közül, az vagy a Percel tanárurat, vagy a Vas tanárurat kell, hogy megkeresse, és hát igaz, hogy ezt már az elején, nagybőjt elején kellett volna belépni, mert tehát úgy teljes a 40 nap, de szerintem nincsen nagy akadálya, ha most menet közben belépnek, mert még úgyis csodaszép egy kihívás. Tehát vagy a Percel tanárurat, vagy a Vas tanárurat kell megkeresni. Igen.
Cool. Gondolom, hogy értettem.
Legalább,
I think I understood half. So if somebody wants, they can go to Tanar or Percel or Vas. And I didn't understand all the numbers. You said that right now the 11th and 12th are doing it, but
and also the 10th.
And also the 10th. Yeah. Okay. Igen. Fiúk és lányok.
Csak fiúk.
For the T-Rex.
A lányoknak van egy másik.
Külön, okay.
Igen.
Okay. Szép. And mióta csinálnak a Szent Imre diákok ez a tradition? Hagyományot.
Ez egy pár éve indult szerintem.
Pár éve.
Igen.
Szép.
És nagyon örülünk, hogy elindult ez a lehetőség.
Igen.
Mert hogyha nem lenne tanári segítség vagy motiválás, akkor szerintem sokkal kevesebb diák csinálna, meg maguktól nem is feltétlenül fedezték volna fel a diákok ezt. Szóval...
Lassabban nem értettem.
Bocsánat. Yeah. Örülünk, hogy elindult ez, és hogy van tanári mentorálás.
Aha.
Mert egyéb... My brain is... I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Szóval, hogy jó, hogy megmutatták nekünk a tanárok, hogy van ilyen.
Igen. Yeah, nagyon gyönyörű, hogy a tanárok részt vennek. Részt vesznek. Igen, szerintem. Ez az igazi közösség itt.
Yeah. Ez az.
Ők a coachok, az edzők.
Mi meg az atléták.
Yeah. És ha szeretnék valóban tanítani valamit, kell bemutatni a diákoknak, valamibe, amit mi magamunk,
magunk
csinálunk. So if we want to teach something, we have to introduce people into what we are actually doing ourselves. Yeah. It's not good just to write things on the board and point. It's a life that we're trying to communicate.
You have to show the example.
Exactly. Yeah.
Ki volt neked az ilyen mentorod régebben, aki mielőtt mondjuk rendhez csatlakoztál, vagy előtte te mennyire voltál gyakorló keresztény, és mennyire élted meg a böjtöt, mielőtt csatlakoztál a ciszterci rendhez?
Gondolom, hogy értettem a kérdésedet. A mentorem volt, biztos az apát Farkasfalvidén is. Nagyon bölcs ember volt, bölcs ember volt, és őszinte szólva, az mai apátom is gyönyörű példa nekem. Az apátom, Péter apát, majdnem mindig a kapunában van. Nagyon, he's very on time. He's on time. És az apátom a busiest, elfoglalt, a legelfoglaltabb ember a monostorban, de mégis mindig van az imádságon. Nekem képest, in comparison to me, or how do you say that? Hozzám képest. Néha tudom találni minden excuse. What's excuse? Kifogás. Valahol más lenni.
Igen.
Yeah. Szóval az apátom is a példa. Yeah.
És mielőtt csatlakoztál a ciszterci rendhez, böjtöltél?
One more time. Mielőtt?
Mielőtt.
Igen. Mikor egyetemista voltam, igen. De talán nem nagyon mélyen.
Tehát, hogy vagy miket csináltál akkor?
What did I do?
Yeah.
Süteményt feladni.
Yeah.
Unalmas. Ez kell megismerni magam. Előtte talán nem megismertem magamat. Magamat.
You can say both.
Nem jól magamat. És ha az ember nem jól megismer magát, akkor ez nehéz tudni, mit kell feladni. És ezért gondolom, hogy mindenki a világon csoki felad.
Ilyen felszínes.
The basic,
Yeah, the basic.
On the surface.
But if you know yourself a little better, you could be a little more creative. Yeah. And igen. So. Válaszoltam a kérdésre.
Abszolút.
Okay.
Tökéletes.
Köszönjük szépen.
Szép. Yeah. Well, maybe we can close with a little encouragement for everybody to find
great.
something.
Great idea.
Yeah. So they have options now with T-Rex. Hopefully they have inspiration here, but to go make a beautiful Lent and do it with others, your family, your friends, invite people into the experience of Lent. And like St. Benedict says, do it with the purpose of looking forward to Easter. Do it for the sake of love, and it will be much easier and much more joyful.
Yeah, and if you fail, that's not the end of the world.
That's right. That's right. That's very important. You go into this experience not wanting to fail, but expecting that I'm weak. And so, of course, I'm going to fall and need to get back up.
It's part of the challenge to
It's
fail.
part of the challenge. That's right. And so don't be afraid of failure. And that's, I'm sure, one of the great gifts of doing it with others in the Exodus group, because then you all say, yeah, it was hard for me too. It was hard for me too. And then you, like a band of brothers fighting.
You're not
next to
left
each other.
out.
That's right.
Everyone's struggling, yeah.
That's right. It's the opposite of a lot of the self-promotion that we could do, like on Instagram or whatever, where everything seems amazing always, you know? In Lent, I love Lent because it's such an honest time. So, cool.
Thank you both for attending this podcast, és köszönöm, hogy ti is részt vettetek, meghallgattátok, és iratkozzatok fel, hogy ne maradjatok le, és sziasztok, Benedicite.
Those who are watching us from the USA or any other part of the world, don't forget to subscribe and watch the previous episodes we've done, and see you later. Bye bye, Benedicite.
Dominus.